The dust of the trail had settled into every crease of Zoe Evans' dress. The fabric, once a vibrant blue, now dulled by the harsh elements of the western frontier. She clutched her 6-month-old son James to her chest as the stagecoach rumbled into the small town of Silver Springs, Nevada, in the autumn of 1876. Her arms ached from holding him for the past 20 hours, but the weight of her child was nothing compared to the burden of decisions that had led her here, a young widow with nothing but a small satchel of belongings and the desperate hope for a new beginning. "End of the line, madam," the stagecoach driver called, his voice gruff after the long journey. "Silver Springs." Zoe stepped down onto the dusty main street, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. Silver Springs appeared to be like many frontier towns, a single wide street lined with wooden buildings, the sound of a piano drifting from the saloon, and the distinct smell of horses, dust, and smoke mingling in the air. "Is there a boarding house in town?" Zoe asked the driver as he unloaded the few bags from the coach. "Mrs. Watkins runs one down yonder." He pointed toward a 2-story building with a small sign hanging from the porch. "But I heard she's full up with the miners coming through for the winter." Zoe's heart sank. She had barely enough money for a few nights' lodging, and that was before considering food or finding work. James stirred against her chest, his small face scrunching as he prepared to wake and inevitably cry from hunger. "Thank you," she murmured, gathering her courage along with her bag. 20 years old and alone in a strange town, but she couldn't afford the luxury of fear. James depended on her. The boarding house confirmed the driver's warning, not a room to be had for at least 2 weeks. The hotel prices were beyond her means. By dusk, Zoe had exhausted her options in town and found herself at the edge of Silver Springs, near a small livery stable. "Madam, you shouldn't be wandering around after dark," a voice called from inside the stable. A moment later, an older man with a gray beard emerged, wiping his hands on a rag. "Especially with a little one." "I'm looking for shelter for the night," Zoe explained, her voice steady despite her desperation, "and perhaps work if you know of any." The stableman, who introduced himself as Henry, shook his head. "No rooms in town, I take it. That's a shame." He glanced at the baby. "I can offer you the hayloft for tonight. It ain't much, but it's dry and off the ground." Zoe could have wept with relief. That would be most appreciated. The hayloft was clean enough, and Henry provided an old horse blanket. Zoe arranged a small hollow in the fresh straw for James, who had been fussing with hunger. She fed him what little milk she had left in the bottle she carried, knowing it wouldn't be enough to keep him satisfied through the night. As James finally drifted to sleep on his makeshift bed of straw, Zoe allowed herself a moment of despair. Her husband Michael had died in a mining accident back in Colorado just 3 months after James was born. The company had given her a pittance as compensation, barely enough to settle his debts and purchase passage to Nevada, where she'd heard women could find decent work in the growing towns. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered, lying down beside her son in the scratchy straw. Just until morning. Dawn broke with the sounds of horses and men's voices below. Zoe quickly tidied herself as best she could, using a small amount of water from her canteen to wash her face and James's tiny hands. The baby was cranky with hunger, and she had nothing left to feed him. When she climbed down from the loft with James balanced on her hip, she found Henry speaking with a tall man whose broad shoulders and weathered face marked him as someone who spent his life outdoors. He wore simple clothes, sturdy trousers, a blue cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a worn leather vest. His hat hung on a peg nearby, revealing dark hair streaked with bits of premature gray at the temples. "This is the lady and her child I mentioned," Henry said to the man. Miss, this here is Noah Larson. Owns a ranch about 5 miles outside town. Noah Larson nodded politely, his gaze assessing but not unkind. Henry says you're looking for work. Yes, sir, Zoe replied, shifting James, who had begun to whimper. I can cook, clean, so anything that's needed. I'm a quick learner. Noah's eyes fell on James, whose cries were growing more insistent. Your boy's hungry. It wasn't a question, and Zoe felt a flash of embarrassment mingled with defensiveness. Yes, we had a long journey. I'll find milk for him once I secure employment. Something in Noah's expression shifted. He turned to Henry. Have them bring my wagon around. Then to Zoe, I need someone to keep house at the ranch. Previous woman left to get married last month. The work is hard, but the pay is fair, and there's a small cabin you can have to yourself. Better than a bed of straw for the little one. Zoe hesitated only briefly, weighing the risk of going with a stranger against the certainty of her current predicament. That's very kind, Mr. Larson, but Noah, he corrected, then added, the offer stands until my wagon's loaded. I need to get back before midday. While Noah discussed business with Henry, a young stable hand brought a wagon around. Zoe considered her options, which were painfully few. She had barely $2 to her name, no prospects in town, and a hungry child. I accept your offer, Mr. Noah, she said when he returned. Thank you. The ride to the ranch was mostly silent. James, exhausted from crying, had fallen into a fitful sleep against Zoe's chest. Noah handled the horses with quiet confidence, occasionally pointing out landmarks or features of the landscape. There's a creek runs through the north pasture, he said at one point. Good water. The ranch house has a pump, though, so you won't need to haul it far. How big is your ranch? Zoe asked, trying to envision what awaited them. Just under 1,000 acres, not large by some standards, but enough for my cattle operation. I've got about 200 head, mostly Herefords. 2 hands working for me year-round, plus extra help during roundup and branding. Zoe nodded, absorbing this information. A cattle ranch meant milk for James, at least. And what would my duties include? Cooking for me and the hands, keeping the house in order, laundry, Noah listed. Previous housekeeper also helped with the garden and chickens. Pay is $20 a month plus room and board in the cabin. It was a fair offer, possibly even generous. Zoe had heard of housekeepers earning far less. That's acceptable, she said. I should tell you that James is my priority. I'll work hard, but I need to care for him too. Noah glanced at the sleeping baby. I figured as much. The cabin's close enough to the main house that you can check on him between chores if needed. After a pause, he added, May I ask about his father? My husband died in a mining accident in Colorado, Zoe replied, the words still painful to say aloud. 3 months after James was born. Noah didn't offer empty condolences, which Zoe appreciated. Instead, he simply nodded and said, That's rough country for a woman alone. They crested a hill, and Noah's ranch came into view in the valley below. A substantial log house stood as the centerpiece, with several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn arranged nearby. A smaller cabin sat about 50 yards from the main house, near a stand of cottonwood trees. Beyond the immediate homestead, pastures stretched toward distant mountains. That's Larson Ranch, Noah said, a hint of pride in his voice. Been building it up for 8 years now. As they approached, 2 men emerged from the barn, one older with a gray mustache, the other younger with reddish hair. Both watched curiously as Noah pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the main house. Zoe Evans, this is Hank Miller, my foreman, Noah introduced the older man, and Daniel Cooper, one of my hands. Both men tipped their hats politely, though Zoe noticed their curious glances at James, who had awakened and was starting to fuss again. "Miss Evans is our new housekeeper," Noah explained. "She and her boy will be taking the cabin." "Pleased to meet you, madam," Hank said. "Been eating Daniel's cooking since Martha left. You're a sight for sore stomachs." This drew a small laugh from Zoe, easing some of the tension she felt. "Daniel, help with Miss Evans' bags," Noah instructed, then turned to Zoe. "Let's get the little one some milk first. Must be starving by now." He led her into the main house, which was surprisingly spacious and well built. The furniture was simple but sturdy, and although it needed a woman's touch, the place was reasonably clean. In the kitchen, Noah poured fresh milk from a covered pail into a cup. "Got a nursing bottle for him." Zoe produced the empty glass bottle from her bag, and Noah filled it. James eagerly accepted it when offered, his tiny hands grasping at the familiar object. "Thank you," Zoe said, the simple kindness nearly bringing tears to her eyes after the hardships of recent days. "Get yourself something to eat too," Noah said, gesturing to the pantry. "There's bread and preserves. Once you're settled, we can discuss your duties more specifically." The cabin, though small, was clean and solidly built. It consisted of one main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and a separate bedroom. The furniture was basic: a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fire, a bed in the bedroom, and an empty cradle that Noah explained had belonged to his sister's child. "She lives in California now," he said, when Zoe raised an eyebrow at the cradle. "Left it here last time she visited, said I might need it someday." He cleared his throat, seeming slightly embarrassed. "Anyway, it's yours to use for the boy." "James," Zoe supplied. "His name is James." Noah nodded. "James, then. Well, I'll leave you to get settled. Supper at the main house is at 6. If you're not up to cooking tonight, we can manage." "I'll be there," Zoe assured him. It was important to establish herself as reliable from the start. After Noah left, Zoe sat in the rocking chair with James in her arms, surveying what would now be their home. It was humble but far better than the alternative she had faced in town. James, with a full belly for the first time in days, gazed up at her with his father's hazel eyes. "We'll be all right here for a while," she told him softly. "Just until we can save enough to get our own place someday." That evening, Zoe prepared a simple but hearty meal of beef stew using supplies from Noah's pantry. The men ate with enthusiasm, complimenting her cooking between mouthfuls. James slept in a basket she had placed near the kitchen, waking only once during the meal. "He's a good baby," Hank commented when James settled quickly after Zoe checked on him. "He is," Zoe agreed, "though he has his moments like any child." "How old is he?" Daniel asked, helping himself to more stew. 6 months next week," Zoe replied, a hint of pride in her voice despite her circumstances. Noah, who had been mostly quiet during the meal, looked up from his plate. "He'll grow strong here. Good air, good food." After a moment's hesitation, he added, "He'll sleep softly under my roof, a sight better than that bed of straw from last night." Something in his tone, a gentleness beneath the matter-of-fact statement, caught Zoe's attention. She studied Noah Larson more carefully than she had before. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of long days in the sun. His hands were calloused from work, but they handled his utensils with surprising grace. There was nothing particularly remarkable about him at first glance, yet something in his quiet confidence and straightforward manner was compelling. "Thank you," Zoe said simply, "for both of us." The days quickly fell into a routine. Zoe rose before dawn to start breakfast for the men, who needed to be in the fields or with the cattle by sunup. She spent her mornings cleaning the main house, doing laundry, or tending to the small vegetable garden that had been somewhat neglected since the previous housekeeper left. Afternoons were for baking, mending, and preparing the evening meal, with breaks to care for James, who usually napped in her cabin or in a makeshift bed in the main house, depending on where Zoe's duties took her. Noah was fair in his expectations, never complaining when James's needs occasionally interrupted Zoe's work. The ranch hands were respectful, particularly old Hank, who seemed to have a soft spot for the baby and would often make wooden toys for him in the evenings. October turned to November, bringing cooler temperatures and the need to prepare for winter. Noah spent long days ensuring the cattle were properly situated in the lower pastures, the hay supplies were adequate, and the ranch buildings were weatherproofed. One evening, as Zoe was finishing the dishes after supper, Noah lingered in the kitchen after the other men had gone to their bunkhouse. "Winter comes hard here sometimes," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Your cabin fireplace should be enough, but if it gets too cold, there's a small stove I can move in there." "We'll be fine," Zoe assured him, drying her hands on her apron. "I've patched the drafty spots around the windows and James and I are used to sharing warmth." Noah nodded, then seemed to struggle with what to say next. "Sunday's the social at the church in town. Thought you might like to go meet some of the other women from surrounding ranches." Zoe looked up in surprise. She hadn't left the ranch since arriving almost a month earlier. "That would be nice, thank you. We'll take the wagon. Leave after morning chores," Noah said, straightening up. "Good night, then." "Good night, Noah." After he left, Zoe found herself smiling as she collected James from his basket. The prospect of meeting other women, perhaps making friends in this new place, lifted her spirits, and Noah's thoughtfulness in suggesting it touched her in an unexpected way. Sunday arrived clear and crisp. Zoe dressed in her best dress, a simple navy blue cotton that had seen better days, but was still presentable when freshly pressed. She wrapped James in a warm blanket Noah had brought from the main house the day before, explaining it had been his as a child. "My mother would be pleased to see it used again," he'd said gruffly when Zoe had expressed concern about accepting such a personal item. The church in Silver Springs was a modest white clapboard building with a small steeple. When they arrived, the service was about to begin, and Noah guided Zoe to a pew near the back. She was acutely aware of the curious glances from the congregation, particularly the women, who whispered behind their hands at the sight of Noah Larson with a young woman and baby. "Noah rarely comes to services," explained the woman who introduced herself as Beatrice Wilson after the sermon. "You must be quite persuasive, dear." "Oh, I didn't," Zoe began, but Noah had approached with James in his arms, having offered to hold him while Zoe met some of the townspeople. "Mrs. Wilson," Noah greeted the older woman. "I see you've met Miss Evans, my new housekeeper." Something in the way he emphasized housekeeper made Zoe wonder what rumors might have already begun to circulate. "Yes, and who is this handsome young man, Mrs. Wilson?" cooed at James, who regarded her with solemn eyes. "This is James, my son," Zoe answered, watching Mrs. Wilson's expression carefully. "I see," the older woman said, her tone cooling slightly. "And Mr. Evans, is he?" "My husband died in a mining accident in Colorado," Zoe explained, the words becoming slightly easier with repetition, though the pain remained. "James and I came to Nevada for a fresh start." Mrs. Wilson's expression softened. "My dear, I'm so sorry. How difficult for you both." She patted Zoe's hand. "You must come to our Ladies' Aid Society meeting next Wednesday. We gather at my home to sew and socialize. Many of the ranch wives attend when weather permits." "Thank you," Zoe said, genuinely appreciative of the invitation. "I'd like that very much." As they rode back to the ranch, Zoe found herself studying Noah's profile as he drove the wagon. "Thank you for taking us today," she said. It was good to meet some of the townspeople. Noah nodded. People can be quick to judge out here, especially women alone. Better they know you're respectable, working for me legitimate-like. Is that why you emphasized I was your housekeeper to Mrs. Wilson? Zoe asked, unable to keep a slight teasing note from her voice. A faint smile touched Noah's lips. Mrs. Wilson has 3 unmarried daughters and a nose for matchmaking. Best to be clear from the start. I see, Zoe replied, an unexpected disappointment flickering through her at his words. Well, I appreciate your concern for my reputation. Noah glanced at her, his expression unreadable. It's not just that. People should know you're under my protection. Makes things easier for you and the boy. The phrase, under my protection, stirred something within Zoe, a feeling of security she hadn't experienced since before Michael's death, but also something more complicated that she wasn't ready to examine. James began to fuss, and she turned her attention to him, grateful for the distraction from her confusing thoughts about Noah Larson. Winter descended on Nevada with a vengeance by early December. Heavy snow isolated the ranch for days at a time, though Noah and his men had prepared well, ensuring there were ample supplies for both people and livestock. On the longest nights after James was asleep, Zoe sometimes accepted Noah's invitation to sit by the fire in the main house. They would talk quietly, Noah telling stories of how he had built the ranch from nothing after coming west as a young man of 22, or Zoe sharing memories of her childhood in Pennsylvania before her family moved to Colorado. How did you meet your husband? Noah asked one evening, his voice carefully neutral as he stoked the fire. Zoe wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. Michael worked for my father's freight business in Denver. He was charming, full of big dreams about striking it rich in the mines. We married when I was 18 against my parents' wishes. She sighed. They were right to be concerned. Michael was a good man at heart but restless, always chasing the next opportunity rather than building something lasting. And you, Noah asked, what were your dreams? The question caught Zoe off guard. No one had asked her that in a very long time. I wanted a home, she said finally. Somewhere stable where children could grow up feeling safe. Michael promised me that once he made his fortune. She smiled sadly. We were both so young. Noah nodded, his eyes reflecting the firelight. That's still a good dream. Yes, Zoe agreed softly. Though now I have more modest expectations. A small place of our own someday, enough to support James and myself. You could have that here, Noah said, his voice low. Nevada's growing. Opportunities for a woman with your skills. Zoe studied him, wondering if there was more to his words than simple encouragement. Perhaps. For now, I'm grateful for this position. You've been more than fair to us. Noah shrugged off her thanks. You're a good worker, and the men appreciate decent meals for a change. After a moment's hesitation, he added, and the boy brings life to the place. That night, as Zoe walked back to her cabin through the snow, James bundled against her chest beneath her coat. She found herself pondering Noah Larson. He was unlike any man she had known, reserved yet kind, strong yet gentle with James. She had caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, only to look away when she noticed. The first Christmas at Larson Ranch was simple but heartfelt. Noah surprised Zoe with a rocking horse for James, though the baby was still too young to use it. He'll grow into it, Noah said when Zoe protested that it was too extravagant a gift. Made it during the evenings. Didn't cost anything but time. The fact that Noah had spent his precious free hours crafting something for her son touched Zoe deeply. Her own gift to Noah, a knitted scarf made from yarn Mrs. Wilson had given her, seemed inadequate in comparison. But he wrapped it around his neck immediately, and wore it daily throughout the winter. As the snow began to melt in early March, bringing muddy roads but also the promise of spring, Zoe realized with some surprise that she and James had been at Larson Ranch for nearly 6 months. James was now a sturdy 1-year-old, crawling enthusiastically and pulling himself up on furniture, his babbling increasingly complex as he attempted his first words. Noah, who had initially been somewhat awkward around the baby, now interacted with James easily, allowing the boy to sit on his lap during evening visits to the main house or carrying him around the ranch yard to see the animals when Zoe was busy with chores. "He said no today," Zoe told Noah one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, or at least something very close to it. Noah's smile was genuine. "Smart boy. Won't be long before he's running around getting into everything." "He already is," Zoe laughed. "I can barely keep up with him sometimes." Noah nodded, his expression growing more serious. "Been meaning to talk to you about something, Zoe." The use of her first name, still somewhat rare from Noah despite their months of acquaintance, caught her attention. "Yes. Cattle drive's coming up next month. I'll be gone for about 3 weeks, taking the herd to the railhead in Carson City." Zoe felt an unexpected pang at the thought of his absence. "I see. Will Hank and Daniel be going too?" "Hank will, and I'm hiring 4 temporary hands. Daniel will stay behind to mind things here, but—" Noah hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "I don't like the idea of you and James being here with just Daniel. He's a good worker but young, and if there was trouble—" "We'll be fine," Zoe assured him, though the prospect of Noah being gone for weeks did leave her feeling strangely vulnerable. "Actually, I thought you might consider staying in town during the drive. Mrs. Wilson mentioned she could use help in her shop and you could take James. Be safer." Zoe was surprised by the suggestion. "That's thoughtful of you, but the cabin is our home now. I'd rather stay if it's all the same." Noah studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Your choice. Just wanted you to have options." As April brought warmer weather and the ranch burst into spring activity, preparations for the cattle drive consumed everyone's time. Noah was often gone from dawn until well after dark, working with the growing herd and training the new hands. Zoe found herself missing their quiet evening conversations, though she told herself it was merely the companionship she missed, not Noah specifically. Still, she took extra care with the meals on the rare evenings when he made it back for supper, and felt an undeniable warmth when he complimented her cooking or asked about James's latest accomplishments. The night before Noah was to leave for the cattle drive, Zoe prepared his favorite meal, roast beef with potatoes, and the apple pie he particularly enjoyed. James, who had recently taken his first unsteady steps, toddled around the kitchen under Zoe's watchful eye as she cooked. Noah came in just as she was setting the table, his clothes dusty from the day's work but his face freshly washed. He scooped up James, who squealed with delight at the attention. "Something smells mighty good," Noah commented, settling James on his hip with practiced ease. "I thought you deserved a proper send-off meal," Zoe explained, suddenly feeling self-conscious about her efforts. "It's a long journey to Carson City." During supper, Noah went over final instructions with Daniel, who listened attentively while shooting occasional nervous glances at Zoe, clearly aware of the responsibility being placed on him. "If there's any trouble any at all, Daniel will ride for help to the Peterson place," Noah told Zoe. "It's only about an hour's ride, and they've got 3 grown sons who can assist if needed." "Noah, you're making me nervous with all these precautions," Zoe said, attempting to lighten the mood. "We'll be perfectly fine. Daniel is very capable." After Daniel excused himself to check on the horses one last time, Noah and Zoe were left alone at the table, an unusual occurrence given that Hank typically joined them for meals. "Zoe," Noah began, his voice serious, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Zoe's heart quickened unexpectedly. "Yes. Your position here, I know it was meant to be temporary when you first arrived. Have you given thought to what you'll do next?" The question was not what Zoe had anticipated, though she wasn't entirely sure what she had been expecting. "I haven't made specific plans," she admitted. "I've been saving most of my wages, but it's not enough yet for James and me to establish ourselves independently." Noah nodded, his expression thoughtful. "What I mean to ask is, would you consider staying on permanently, not just as housekeeper, but—" He trailed off, then seemed to gather his courage. "The ranch needs a woman's touch, James needs a proper home, and I find myself appreciating your presence here more than I expected to." Zoe stared at him, trying to decipher his meaning. "Are you offering me a permanent position as your housekeeper?" Noah met her gaze directly. "I'm asking if you would consider becoming my wife." The words hung in the air between them. Zoe's mind raced. Marriage to Noah had never explicitly occurred to her, though she couldn't deny there had been moments when she'd felt a connection between them that went beyond employer and employee. "I know it's sudden," Noah continued when she didn't immediately respond, "and I'm not asking for love. Not yet. But I believe we could build a good life together. I respect you, Zoe, and James already feels like—" He paused. "I care for the boy, would raise him as my own." "Noah, Zoe struggled to organize her thoughts. "This is unexpected." "I understand," he said quickly. "You don't need to answer now. I'll be gone 3 weeks. Give it thought while I'm away. Whatever you decide, your position here is secure either way." Zoe nodded, still processing his proposal. "Thank you for that assurance, at least." They finished the meal in a somewhat awkward silence, though Noah made an effort to keep things normal by playing with James before the boys' bedtime. As Noah prepared to leave for his own quarters, he paused at the door. "One more thing, Zoe. I may not be a man of flowery words, but I want you to know this isn't just about practicality. There's more to it than that." With that cryptic statement, he left, leaving Zoe to ponder his words as she put James to bed. The following morning dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for starting a cattle drive. Zoe rose early to prepare breakfast and pack provisions for Noah and Hank. The atmosphere was busy but tense, with Noah giving final instructions to Daniel and checking equipment. Just before mounting his horse, Noah approached Zoe, who stood on the porch with James in her arms. "Remember what I said. Any trouble, any at all, send Daniel for help." "We'll be fine," Zoe assured him, adjusting James on her hip. "Be safe on the trail." Noah reached out and briefly touched James's cheek, then, in a move that surprised them both, leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on Zoe's forehead. 3 weeks, he said softly. "Think about what I asked." Then he was gone, riding off with Hank and the other hands, the cattle moving in a great, dusty mass across the pastures toward the distant hills. The first week of Noah's absence passed uneventfully. Daniel proved capable of handling the reduced workload, and Zoe kept busy with her usual chores and caring for James. But in the evenings, when James was asleep and the house was quiet, she found herself missing Noah's presence more than she had anticipated. She turned his proposal over in her mind repeatedly. Marriage to Noah would provide security for herself and James, a permanent home on a prosperous ranch, and a father figure for her son. But Zoe had married once for practical reasons, Michael's charm and promises of financial security, and that had ended with her widowed and destitute. Yet Noah was different from Michael in every way. Where Michael had been impulsive and dream-driven, Noah was steady and deliberate. Where Michael had made grand promises, Noah built things with his own hands. And the way Noah looked at James, with genuine affection rather than mere tolerance, spoke volumes about the kind of man he was. But was that enough? Could she enter a marriage based on mutual respect and practical considerations, without the love she had once felt for Michael? The second week brought unexpected challenges. A spring storm blew in from the mountains, bringing heavy rain that caused a small creek on the property to overflow, threatening one of the outbuildings. Daniel worked tirelessly to divert the water, with Zoe helping as much as she could while keeping James safe and dry. One evening, as they sat exhausted after a day of fighting the flooding, Daniel cleared his throat awkwardly. "Miss Evans, can I speak frankly?" "Of course, Daniel," Zoe replied, surprised by his serious tone. "The boss, Noah, he's a good man, best I've worked for." Daniel twisted his hat in his hands. "Before he left, he made me promise to look after you and James proper, said you were precious to him." Zoe felt her cheeks warm. "Did he?" Daniel nodded. "Never seen him take to anyone the way he has to you and the little one. Changed him somehow. He used to be all about the work from sunup to sundown. Now he takes time to watch the sunset sometimes. Smiles more too." Zoe didn't know how to respond to this unexpected insight into Noah's feelings. "Thank you for telling me, Daniel." That night, as the rain continued to fall outside her cabin, Zoe made her decision. The third week dragged by, the ranch returning to normal as the flood waters receded and the weather improved. Zoe found herself watching the trail from town whenever she had a spare moment, anticipating Noah's return with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Finally, on a warm afternoon in early May, she spotted riders approaching from the south. James, who had been playing in the yard under her watchful eye, seemed to sense her excitement and followed her gaze. "Noah?" he asked, his small face screwing up in concentration as he formed the name that had become one of his few clear words. "Yes, sweetheart." "Noah's coming home," Zoe replied, lifting him into her arms. "Let's go welcome him." Noah looked tired and trail-worn as he dismounted in the ranch yard, but his face brightened at the sight of Zoe and James waiting on the porch. He spoke briefly to Hank and the other hands, then approached them, removing his hat. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his eyes scanning them both as if checking for any changes during his absence. "We had some flooding from the storm, but Daniel managed it well," Zoe reported. "Otherwise, all quiet." James stretched out his arms toward Noah, who took him with a smile that transformed his weathered face. "Grown an inch, I'd wager," Noah said, bouncing the boy gently. "Missed you, little man." Zoe's heart swelled at the sight. "He missed you too." "Kept asking for Noah every day." Noah's eyes met hers over James's head. "And you, Zoe, did you think about what I asked?" Zoe took a deep breath. "I did." "Can we discuss it later when you've had a chance to rest and clean up?" Noah nodded, handing James back to her. "I'll be in after I settle accounts with the men." That evening, after James was asleep and the house was quiet, Zoe and Noah sat on the porch of the main house. The spring night was mild, with stars scattered across the clear sky and the distant sound of cattle lowing in the pastures. "The drive was successful," Noah said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Got a good price for the cattle. Ranch is on solid footing for the year." "I'm glad," Zoe replied sincerely. "You work hard for this place." Noah turned to face her, his expression serious in the dim light. "About what I asked before I left?" "Yes," Zoe said simply. Noah stared at her. Yes, I'll marry you, Noah." Zoe met his gaze steadily. "If the offer still stands." For a moment, Noah seemed speechless. Then a slow smile spread across his face, not the reserved half-smile she was accustomed to, but a full, genuine expression of joy that transformed his features. "It stands," he confirmed, reaching for her hand. "May I ask what decided you?" Zoe considered her answer carefully. "Many things. The way you are with James, the kind of man you've shown yourself to be over these months, the home you've built here." She paused. "And perhaps most importantly, the fact that when you were gone, this place felt empty in a way that had nothing to do with the physical absence of people." Noah's grip on her hand tightened. "Zoe, I need you to know something. This isn't just a practical arrangement for me. I've come to care for you deeply. I'm not good with words like this, but—" "I know," Zoe said softly. "I've come to care for you too, Noah. I didn't expect it, but there it is." Noah leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, he kissed her gently, his hand coming up to cup her cheek with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "When would you like to marry?" he asked. "Soon," Zoe replied without hesitation. "There's no reason to wait, is there?" "None that I can think of," Noah agreed. "There's a circuit preacher comes through Silver Springs every other Sunday. He'll be there in 10 days. 10 days it is then," Zoe said, smiling. The wedding was a simple affair at the Silver Springs Church. Mrs. Wilson and the ladies from the Aid Society decorated the small building with spring wildflowers, and most of the surrounding ranchers attended, curious to see Noah Larson finally taking a wife after years of bachelorhood. Zoe wore a new dress of pale blue cotton, purchased with some of her savings. James, dressed in a small suit Noah had ordered from Carson City, watched the proceedings with solemn curiosity from Hank's arms, occasionally calling out "Mama" or "No-ah" to the amusement of the congregation. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Noah kissed Zoe with a restrained passion that promised more when they were alone, his hand steady on her waist as they turned to face their neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Larson. The celebration afterward at the ranch was lively, with music provided by a local fiddler and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. As evening fell, the last visitors departed, leaving the newlyweds alone with a sleeping James and the quiet ranch spread out around them. "Well, Mrs. Larson," Noah said, taking her hand as they stood on the porch watching the sunset. "Welcome home." Zoe squeezed his fingers, a contentment she hadn't felt in years settling over her. "It already feels like home, has for some time now." That night, after checking on James one last time in what was now their cabin soon to be expanded, Noah had promised, Zoe joined her husband in the main house. Their coming together as husband and wife was both tender and passionate, Noah's reverent touch conveying what his words sometimes couldn't, that this marriage, practical as its beginnings might have been, was rooted in genuine feeling. As spring turned to summer, and summer to fall, life at Larson Ranch settled into a new rhythm. Zoe moved between the cabin and main house until Noah completed the promised expansion, connecting the two buildings with a covered walkway and adding 2 new rooms to create a proper family home. James thrived under their combined care, growing into a sturdy toddler with Noah's determined nature and Zoe's curious spirit. He followed Noah around the ranch whenever possible, solemnly observing cattle and horses with wide eyes, and delighted in helping Zoe gather eggs from the chicken coop. On a crisp November evening, just over a year after Zoe had first arrived at Larson Ranch, she and Noah sat by the fire after putting James to bed. Noah had been unusually quiet all day, and Zoe had noticed him watching her with a thoughtful expression. "Something on your mind?" she asked, settling beside him on the sofa. Noah took her hand, his calloused thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "Been thinking about how much has changed in a year. This time last year, you were sleeping in my hayloft with James on a bed of straw. Zoe smiled at the memory. And you offered us shelter, saying he would sleep softly under your roof. Best decision I ever made, Noah said simply. Bringing you here. I believe that honor goes to Henry at the livery, Zoe teased. He's the one who told you about us. Noah shook his head. I was already looking for a housekeeper, but I wasn't looking for a wife or a son. Found them anyway. Zoe leaned against his shoulder, comfortable in the easy affection that had grown between them. Life has a way of giving us what we need, even when it's not what we thought we wanted. Noah turned to face her more directly. Speaking of which, I've noticed you've been tired lately, and sick in the mornings. Zoe felt a flutter of surprise that he had noticed. She'd been trying to hide her morning sickness, wanting to be certain before sharing her suspicion. You've been watching me that closely. I watch everything I care about, Noah said simply. Are you going to tell me, or do I have to guess? A smile spread across Zoe's face. If your guess is that James will have a little brother or sister by next summer, then you'd be right. The joy that transformed Noah's expression was worth any discomfort she had experienced. He gathered her into his arms, his embrace gentle but fierce. A baby, he whispered against her hair. Our baby. Yes, Zoe confirmed, her own happiness bubbling over. Our family is growing. Noah placed a hand reverently on her still flat stomach. Thank you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. For James, for this new little one, for making this house truly a home. Thank you for giving us a roof to sleep softly under, Zoe replied, echoing his words from a year ago. And so much more. In the years that followed, the Larson ranch prospered and expanded, as did the family that called it home. Emma Larson was born the following June, a healthy daughter with her father's dark hair and her mother's determined chin. 2 years later, William joined the family, completing their circle. James grew into his role as oldest brother with pride, showing his siblings the ranch that had become his heritage as much as if he'd been born there. Though Zoe made sure he knew about his birth father, it was Noah he called Pa from the day they married. A title Noah cherished beyond any other. On James's 10th birthday, Noah took him riding to the far boundary of the ranch, now nearly twice the size it had been when Zoe first arrived. They stopped on a ridge overlooking the valley, the ranch buildings small in the distance. One day, all this will be yours to share with your brother and sister, Noah told him, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. Built it with my own hands, but it was just land and cattle until your mother brought you here. You made it a family. James, serious beyond his years in that moment, nodded. Ma told me how you found her, how I slept on straw the night before you met us. Best day of my life, Noah said simply. Finding you both. As they rode back toward home, where Zoe waited with a birthday celebration prepared, Noah reflected on the twists of fate that had brought them together. A widow and her infant, desperate for shelter. A lonely rancher with a house but no home. And the simple truth he'd recognized that very first day that the boy sleeping on straw deserved better. And the woman with tired eyes and unwavering determination deserved someone to share her burdens. Love had come later, growing slowly from respect and shared purpose into something deep and unshakable. Not the impulsive passion of youth, but something more enduring, a love built on choice and commitment, tested by hardship and strengthened by joy. As they approached the ranch house, Zoe emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the setting sun. Emma clung to her skirts, while William sat playing with wooden blocks on the porch floor. The sight of them, his family, his heart outside his body, still had the power to take Noah's breath away, even after all these years. Race you home, Pa, James called, spurring his pony forward. Noah laughed and followed, the sound carrying across the land that had once seemed enough, but now, was merely the foundation for something far more precious, a family that had begun with a baby sleeping on straw and a cowboy's simple promise of shelter, growing into a legacy of love that would endure for generations to come.